So I have this theory that, like us, the ancients made tools and used the same principles as you would in a small tool as you would in a large. For instance, we have teaspoons, and then we have larger spoons for stirring, and then it goes up to a shovel for digging. And I believe what I found in my patterning here is the Indigenous did the same. So I'm going to start with this one. I have no clue what this big one is, but you can see how it has a larger lobe and a smaller lobe. And so this is very much in keeping with this one, with the larger lobe going to a point, smaller lobe. This one going to a point. This one, which is broken, it's missing a piece, but the same. And so as we go on down, this one, it's been notched out there to a point. There's a little notch there, which might give us a clue that it would have been tied and hafted as such. And the way it's been angled there and there. And it goes all the way down to this one, which has a bit of a lobe and the same notch. And when you start comparing not only the shapes, like I've done recently, you can almost stack them up. Not almost, you can. And their notches and their shapes become very undeniably congruent. So I like this set in that it really does show how they use the technology like we have for large and small tools, same principle. Now this, again, is a similar example. I've got the 3 points that I talked about before coming to a point, and all the way down to something quite small. This one I find interesting because where it is, instead of just a 3 triangular kite, it's been notched a little bit here. So it is perhaps a spearhead. This one I found interesting because it has this little groove here, which again might give us a hint as to how it would have been tied and used as a spearhead. Okay, so then we have this one, which is similar, but it progresses, like I said, down to this notching affair. So you can tell instead of being the kite, they've now started to notch. And there's a notch there. This one is highly eroded, but you can tell at some point it's got a pinch or a notching. This one down to this little fella. So following up on a couple of other different styles of tools, but same principle of small to large, I'm going to start here with what I believe to be axes of some sort. And the only reason I believe this is because, as I mentioned earlier, I watch William Sherrar, who does YouTubes. He's an Indigenous person in the States who also has archaeology credentials. And he had exact same ones in one of his YouTube. I have no idea how these were used, whether this was a notch to hold it, if they possibly could have been hafted, not sure. But again, you can see this one's pretty straight, but the next one that seems to either they progressed or changed their style, or it's just different, it alludes a little bit to the 3 points with this notch out the side. And then as we go along here, same deal, a little bit of a notch out the side with the 3 points, tapered to a point. This one, same notching. This lovely long one. And as we go down to, I'm not sure if these were spearheads, or I'm wondering if they could have been the weight for an atlatl. So this would have been your atlatl, and perhaps this would have been weighting it. Or it could be a spearhead, I'm not sure. But my point is that as you look at these, exact same principle as we got going on here and here, 1, 2, 3 with a side notch, as you do in the smaller versions. And this one would be a similar example of a larger. This is a similar example of the larger form of this, as is this one. That one you can see how they have notched that out, which I think might give us, and there's a notch here and a notch here, and because this is greenstone and didn't erode as quickly as these other examples, it might give us a clue that it was actually hafted. We talked about the roundedness to prevent slippage. There's a notch here, and one here, that it may have been hafted as such with the hide around, and these notches would have stopped slippage. In the last example, this is another example that maybe gives us a clue, and it was hafted. This is the business end, because there's a bit of a leftover notch here. I believe these are 3 little peck marks, a notch here and a notch here, which again would help them to secure and stop slippage of the hide or whatever the binding material they use to create their weapon, their tool, their hunting apparatus. Back to the almond shapes, which we talked about before. Same deal. We've got this little wee fellow, which to me looks like it's been ground to a nice sharpness there, but it's also been notched there. So whether it was used as a point or a scraper, maybe both, maybe an owl or a perforator and a scraper. Then we have this one step up, and you can see this one hasn't eroded as much, even though it is a shale type material. You can see how it was ground to an edge and has that same almondy point. And this one again, I think because it's a granite of sorts, you can actually see the chipping marks. Which leads me to believe this one was not ground, but it still has that same shape. This one comes to an edge, so it perhaps might have been ground to that nice edge. And then we go on up to larger, and whether these were axes or for actual digging, perhaps for agriculture. And this one, again the edge, down to a point. And if we take this as a prop to show, which I did see online, as soon as you do this and imagine it tied, then it kind of gives a clear image of what perhaps they would have had. And to me, it could have been a hoe or an axe, or both.